Mount Everest claims most climbers through avalanches or blizzards, but the dumbest deaths happen in silence. One ice screw placed days before, 1 foot off the flagged path, a faulty regulator, a normal stove in a closed tent. Above 8,000 meters, a tiny error spirals instantly from invisible to fatal, and rescue isn't coming. What is the real cost of a single mistake when time itself becomes the killer? Dawa Norbu moved along the north side's second step, clipped to a line that had held dozens of climbers already that week. Each anchor in this zone looks solid, a screw drill deep into blue ice, webbing tight, carabiners locked. But at 28,300 feet, nothing stays perfect for long. The ice itself changes hour by hour, growing brittle as the sun shifts or softening under spindrift. Screws that felt bomb-proof on installation can loosen with every shift, every load, every gust. The plan behind these lines is simple redundancy. Multiple anchors, checked and reset as needed. But traffic and fatigue wear down vigilance. In some stretches, only a single screw holds the line, its threads biting into ice that's been stressed by days of climbers. There's no alarm when that margin disappears, no warning light, no creak. The difference between secure and doomed is invisible, hidden beneath a thin crust of frost. On May 20th, 2017, winds built to 70 kilometers per hour near the second step. Gusts hit from the side, turning a climber's weight into a sudden shock load. The force multiplies instantly, exceeding what the screw's shear strength can handle. 1 second, Dawa's harness is tight. The next, the anchor rips free. There's no time to react. No backup to catch the fall. The line whips loose as the screw twists out of the ice, and the climber drops away from the ridge. Above 8,000 meters, rescue isn't an option. The mechanics of the failure are cold and absolute. A single-point anchor, overloaded by wind and repetition, becomes a fatal weak link. On Everest, the smallest shortcut in equipment or inspection doesn't just increase risk. It removes all second chances. The mountain doesn't need to move, it waits for the hardware to fail. At 28,300 feet, the idea of rescue is a fantasy. When a climber goes over the edge in the death zone, there is no call for help, no team scrambling down to search. The physics of exposure at that altitude are simple and final. Wind chill drives skin temperature down by degrees every minute. Oxygen drops with every breath. Within 12 minutes of a fall, the human body loses most of its core heat to the thin air. Even if a team wanted to descend, the risk calculation is absolute. One life lost cannot justify risking more. The decision to abort any retrieval attempt is made fast, sometimes in under a quarter of an hour. There is no debate. The only action left is to log the coordinates, mark the last point of contact, and move on. The margin for error is erased by the environment itself. Any delay, standing still, searching for a lost climber, or trying to reach a fallen teammate, turns the rescuers into casualties. Above 8,000 meters, even a short pause drains oxygen reserves and core temperature at a rate that cannot be reversed. Exposure risk computations are unforgiving. A stationary climber loses up to 2 degrees Celsius of body heat per minute, and hypoxia accelerates every error. The mountain enforces its own rules. No one comes back from a descent gone wrong in this zone. For Dawa Norbu, the outcome was immediate and irreversible. The anchor failed, the fall was unarrested, and the team recorded the incident as a set of GPS coordinates. There is no closure, no recovery. The only trace is a line in a logbook and the knowledge that, for every climber at this altitude, rescue is never part of the plan. The mountain collects its due in silence, and the living continue down, counting their own minutes against the cold. Kei Tanaka set out from base camp before sunrise, hauling a 45-kilogram load across the lower Khumbu Glacier. The official route, marked by a line of colored flags, wound through the maze of crevasses and shifting snow bridges. Every flag meant the icefall doctors had checked that section, at least for that morning. Still, the flagged path was slow, jammed with climbers and porters inching forward, each waiting for a gap to cross the next ladder or bottleneck. Kay eyed a corridor of wind-packed snow just a few meters off the flagged line. It looked firm, undisturbed by the day's traffic, and promised a faster walk to Camp 1. With the heavy pack biting into his shoulders, the shortcut was tempting. He stepped off the marked route, boots crunching across the crust. The glacier here was a living thing, always shifting, but the surface gave no sign of weakness. The flags, spaced every 10 meters, faded behind him. His mind focused on saving time, not on the reason for the route's twists and turns. The snow bridge ahead stretched 3 meters across a shallow dip. Its surface wind hardened and smooth. It looked identical to dozens he'd crossed before. Kay pressed forward, trusting his weight to the bridge, unaware that overnight the glacier had shifted beneath. The flagged route had skirted this exact spot for a reason. Icefall doctors had read the tension in the snow, the subtle ridges that signaled a void below. But without the flags as a guide, that knowledge was invisible. The shortcut, just a few steps off the main route, erased the line between safe and fatal. The crevasse swallowed Kei Tanaka in seconds. The snow bridge, which had seemed solid, collapsed without a sound. He dropped nearly 30 meters, the weight of his pack pulling him deeper as the fractured lip gave way above. Within minutes, word spread to the teams nearby. Rescue ropes appeared, and climbers tried to probe the opening, but the glacier's geometry was already shifting underfoot. Each attempt to anchor a line caused more of the edge to crumble, widening the gap and threatening to take the rescuers with it. The cold at this altitude seeped through gloves and boots, numbing hands and slowing every movement. After 2 hours, the decision was made. The risk to those above was growing with every passing minute. The glacier's slow, relentless movement had already started to seal the opening, ice walls pressing in, snow settling over the void. The only things recovered were a few pieces of gear near the surface. The rest was out of reach, claimed by the glacier's slow churn. Kay's location was logged, coordinates sent down to base camp, and the teams moved on. On Everest, some losses are simply absorbed by the mountain. The glacier does not return what it takes. For those left above, the lesson is written in the shifting ice. No shortcut is worth the price when rescue is not possible. The mountain's silence is final. Mila Savick approached the southeast ridge above the balcony with a plan built on precision. Her oxygen system was set to a low flow, just 0.5 liters per minute, to stretch each cylinder as far as possible. The margin for error was thin. A 30-minute reserve, calculated for a steady climb, no stops, no surprises. At nearly 27,500 feet, every breath matters, and the system's reliability becomes a lifeline. But in the sub-zero dark, physics shifts the odds. As Mila exhaled, warm, humid air condensed inside the regulator. The rapid expansion of pressurized oxygen, known as the Joule-Thomson effect, dropped the temperature inside the valve below freezing. Ice crystals began to form, slowly choking the flow. The pressure gauge still read normal, masking the problem until the mask's resistance grew. Fumbling with numb fingers, Mila tried to swap cylinders. The icing inside the regulator turned a routine change into a critical delay. As hypoxia crept in, dexterity faded. The longer she struggled, the faster the cold and altitude stripped away her ability to troubleshoot. The plan to conserve oxygen backfired in the most unforgiving place on Earth, where a hidden blockage in a valve can erase all calculations. In the death zone, even a minor mechanical freeze can become the only fact that matters. Anika Hollis zipped her tent tight against the wind at Camp 4, 26,000 feet above sea level. The storm pressed the fabric flat, sealing every seam and vent. Inside, the only warmth came from her stove, burning just inches from her sleeping bag. Melting snow for water is a routine chore at this altitude, and stoves run intense all the time. But as the spindrift piled against the outer walls and the air grew still, a silent hazard began to build. With every minute, carbon monoxide seeped into the small space, rising toward dangerous levels, 120 parts per million, enough to cloud judgment and slow reflexes. The symptoms crept in quietly: a dull headache, a sense of fog, the kind of fatigue that's easy to blame on altitude. Headlamps flicker over the stove, but the flame's subtle change goes unnoticed. Sleep deprivation and cold numb the senses further. Anika lay down for a short rest, her breathing shallow, her mind drifting. There was no panic, no struggle. Carbon monoxide poisoning mimics exhaustion and altitude sickness so closely that the warning signs blur together. By the time the wind shifted and fresh air slipped through a gap in the tent, the damage was already done. The scene inside remained calm and undisturbed, a quiet end in the thin air where even routine choices can become fatal. Every system on Everest is designed with a backup in mind: double anchors, twin ropes, spare regulators, redundant oxygen lines. In theory, a single failure should never become fatal, but at altitude, redundancy erodes quietly. A backup anchor is only as strong as the last inspection. A second regulator is useless if both freeze from the same breath. The logic of survival depends on layers, yet each layer is vulnerable to the same invisible forces: cold, fatigue, crowds, and the slow decay of vigilance. On the ridge, a fixed line might look secure, but if the ice beneath has softened or the hardware has been loaded too many times, the safety net is gone before anyone notices. In a tent, the routine act of closing a vent to block spindrift can turn a lifeline into a trap, as air quality shifts without warning. Oxygen systems, too, can betray their users. A pressure gauge may show full, but a frozen valve or blocked hose means the backup is only an illusion. The lesson repeats across every case. The mountain rewards those who build in margin and punishes shortcuts without appeal. Time and oxygen are spent with every pause, every hesitation, every shortcut. When the margin disappears, there's no warning, only the cold fact that the next link in the chain is empty. On Everest, invisible threats are the most reliable, and the only certainty is that the clock never stops. Luis Calderon's summit push started with a calculation: 2 full oxygen cylinders, set to flow at 4 liters per minute, enough for a steady climb in a short summit window. The plan assumed movement, each step trading altitude for time, each breath measured against the shrinking reserve. But above the south summit, the ridge narrowed and the line of climbers slowed to a crawl. 30 people clipped to the same fixed rope, all facing the same direction, all waiting for the cue to inch forward. The summit pyramid hovered ahead, deceptively close, but the line barely moved. Oxygen math in the death zone is unforgiving. Standing still at 28,750 feet, Luis's body burned through reserves faster than the plan allowed. At 4 liters per minute, each pause cost precious minutes, the buffer shrinking by an estimated 2% with every minute of delay. The cold bit deeper, draining heat as the wind scoured exposed faces and hands. Stationary exposure made every climber's system work harder, burning through oxygen to stay warm, to stay conscious. The cue became a trap. The fixed line, designed for safety, now prevented anyone from passing. Luis's mask pressed tight to his face, regulator hissing, the pressure gauge dropping in slow, relentless ticks. The summit looked close, but the numbers told a different story. Time and oxygen slipping away, minute by minute, with no way to regain what was lost. Every calculation depended on forward motion, but the mountain didn't care. The ridge held them in place, and the reserves kept dropping, silent and unseen, until the math no longer worked. The line of climbers inched forward, boots scraping against rock and packed snow, every movement deliberate and slow. Luis Calderon's mask pressed tight, the hiss of his regulator growing fainter as the pressure dropped. The summit pyramid loomed just ahead, maybe 40 vertical meters, but the ridge offered no shelter, no place to gather strength. The fixed rope, stretched taut by the weight of the cue, ran along a knife edge of exposure, one side a sheer drop to the Kangshung face, the other a sloping wall of wind-scoured ice. At 28,750 feet, the body's margin for error is gone. Fingers lose their grip, legs move on memory, and the brain narrows to the next step, the next breath. A pause in the line sent a ripple of slack through the rope. Luis shifted his weight, boots planted wide, waiting for motion to resume. The wind cut across the ridge, shaking loose crystals from his jacket. His glove caught on a carabiner, just as he tried to unclip and step forward. A single crampon point missed the edge, scraping over bare rock, and his balance faltered. The slack in the rope gave no resistance. Gravity took over. Luis slid 2 meters down the exposed slope, boots kicking for purchase. But there was nothing to stop the momentum. The fixed line, stretched by the crowd above, offered no anchor. In seconds, he was gone, pulled away from the ridge, vanishing into the thin air below. There was no chance to recover, no time for a shout or a grab. The queue above barely shifted. A climber's fall at this altitude is silent, almost routine, a brief commotion, a gap in the line, and then the slow return to forward motion. The summit remained in sight, but Luis Calderón became a coordinate, logged in a notebook, another name lost to the ridge. On Everest, a slip at the wrong moment is all it takes. The mountain waits for movement to stop, and then it finishes the job. Even now, Everest's highest risks aren't the storms. They're the seconds lost to a small mistake, a missed sign, a silent system failure. As summit traffic increases and technology multiplies, the margin for error only shrinks. The mountain's calculus remains unchanged. Hesitation is fatal above 8,000 meters. It waits for the next decision. Stay sharp. If this made you think, join the conversation below.